Okay, so we've worked our way in Vasari through adding a site. We've done a solar radiation study with Ecotech solar radiation. I've deleted that solar radiation file, and now I'm ready to open up the Ecotech wind tools that are in Vasari and do some quick wind studies so that we can add some additional information to our building concept and our building site analysis. So what we're going to do first with this is we're going to open up the Ecotech windrows, and I was actually having a problem earlier which was kind of interesting and had me stumped for a minute, and I want to show you something really quickly. If I go back to my location, this is where I loaded my location file. There will be several weather stations that are loaded up inside of the project. One of the issues that I was having was when I would launch the Ecotech windrows, it was actually not finding data from the local weather station. It was using weather station 59308, and for some reason I was getting an error message and the windrows program would actually not start at all. I don't know exactly what's going on with the servers at 59308, but simply by switching to a different weather station, also very close to our site, and saying okay, it actually resolved all the problems in terms of working with windrows. So that's just something to kind of take note of. Most of the projects that you work on in the United States should have a reasonably close weather station. Not always within 5 or 6 miles, but something that's close enough to create some solid assumptions about what the wind pattern is doing. So again, with my site, I'm going to go ahead and launch Ecotech windrows. And this is going to open up a windrows map for me. And right now it's located at my project site, but I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, and I'm going to turn this back to satellite again as well. And if you notice, the windrows right now is locked in at the actual weather station. I'm going to change that to our project location. So you can see it's putting the windrows over the project location. And the next thing that I'm going to do is work on some of the misconceptions about how we as designers read a windrows. So typically I see students all the time look at, okay, this is the windrows for Springfield, Missouri, and the common statement is, so it must be that our wind is predominantly out of the southeast. So that's what I'm going to use as a design tool when I think about natural ventilation. If you look at the chart here at the bottom, that is actually wind looking at a 30-year time period over a full day and a full year. So this amount of wind might actually be something that I sincerely do not want in terms of my natural ventilation. So, you know, from, let's say, November, December, January, and February, we're more interested in blocking wind than using it for natural ventilation. What we're interested in terms of wind is actually maybe looking at mid-April, May, June, July, August, and part of September, and particularly in the day and the time that our building is occupied. So let's start with that. Let's move our wind slider to late April and mid-September, and then let's also specifically look at a time of day that we might want to actually be using wind while the building is the most occupied. Let's say from 8 until 4 or 5 o'clock. And you can see that that really shifts the wind pattern around more to the south. In particular, the hottest months of the year in Springfield, if we look at mid-June through August, all of a sudden we can see that the wind data is really shifted more dramatically to the south-southwest. This is when we're most interested, perhaps, in generating some designs that would capture natural ventilation and natural air current movement through our design. Then we can also use this same tool to look specifically at winter wind currents. So if I slide this right on over, let's look at our windrows from mid-November to mid-February, and then the same time of day. Now we're looking at wind that's south-southeast and north-northwest as the predominant wind load that we're really wanting to block at this time of year. So let's go ahead and send this to our project. So what it's doing right now, it's actually building a parametric model of the windrows to be displayed on our project site. So again, that is the winter wind load. And now this is a file that I can go ahead and run an export on to create any type of visual that I might want to convey wind data as part of my design information specific to a site. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that file, and let's look at the other wind tool now as well. So also tapping into that local weather data is the Ecotech wind tunnel. So go ahead and launch that as a program. So what wind tunnel does is it actually gives us a visual representation of wind currents moving around our site and around our building. So at the top I have a windrows compass, and I'm going to position that in particular. Let's look at the south-southwest wind that we're perhaps most interested in capturing to naturally ventilate our building. And you can see obviously the west side of the building is where we are creating sort of a wind buffer, and we know that if we create some openings along this side and perhaps some openings along this side, that we can actually start to do some good in terms of natural ventilation. We can also move the windrows around to this edge and look at it in terms of a winter wind that we want to block. And this would be a good potential to, let's say, not place an entry door directly facing the strong winter wind currents as our main entry. So let's go ahead and close this down really quick. And let's look at how we can also build another conceptual model to tap into that idea of looking at cross ventilation for overall building design. So if I go to my model tab and create another mass, I'm going to very quickly model a very, very crude section model of our building here at HSA. I'm just going to go ahead and pull this up, and I'm going to use my align tool, roof to top edge. I'm going to be more generous than the building actually is with windows, and we'll just create a big opening all the way across this edge. I'm going to select that and say, instead of creating a form this time, I'm going to create a void. And we'll pull this both in and out. So you can see we've got a nice sort of hole in the wall. I'm going to say finish mass and select that, and I'm going to copy it from one side to the other. And I'm not being terribly precise, so forgive me. Let's go ahead and build a roof and floor system in very quickly. So I'm going to go back to create mass again. And this time I'm going to go ahead and build a floor system in. And I'm most interested in sort of representing that second floor level, because that's really one of the only locations that we have operable windows. And I'm going to go ahead and put a roof on this as well. Essentially, what I'm wanting to do is going ahead and boxing this entire system in. And then let's put a wall at this edge as well. Let's do one more box that we want to run from fake it till I make it here. Edit profile. And we'll run this. right along the back edge of this quick mock-up section. And again, I'm not really paying close attention to overall sizes of things. I just want to create an idea of what could be going on. Because again, the goal here is to use this at the conceptual design level. Need to grab that entire polygon. Work with me. There it is. Oh, I missed again. Okay, so I've basically built this entire box. I'm not going to worry about filling in the other side. I think you'll get the idea here. So knowing that that's the basic cross-section of what we have in our design, I'm kind of curious as to how well the building has the potential for cross-ventilation with the current design. So I'm going to go back to Analyze, Ecotech Wind Tunnel, and this time you'll see that we have the overall building mass and then this new massing form that I've modeled in here as well. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to my model display and I'm going to turn off element surfaces. So we basically get an outline of our building. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move the wind direction so that we're not going through the open wall here. Let's do something like that. Again, we're going to move the wind out of the south-southwest. And then I need to move the wind up in terms of this analysis plane right here. So it's actually interacting with those window openings. And I can do that by changing my position of my wind slice so that it's actually cutting through. So I can see that there are definitely some things happening. I'm definitely getting some airflow through the building, which is good. But I also want to see, okay, let's analyze this, not just from this horizontal plane, but let's analyze it from a vertical plane. So using the tool in Wind Tunnel, we can also analyze the way wind is going to cut through a space. And we can start to see some interesting things. First of all, as wind is passing through, we know we're occupying largely the space below the windows. And you can see that any cross ventilation we do have, unfortunately, stays only up high. In fact, it even sort of arcs up just a little bit, keeping us comfortably out of any potential wind movement, other than perhaps it having the opportunity to pull a little bit of the hot air off of us as it rises. So again, not the most productive in terms of cross-ventilating a design. So let's look at one other option with windrows. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the 2D slice data, and let's look at it in a volumetric way. So turning on volumetric, the point cloud, you can see, doesn't give us a lot of usable visual data, but what is really nice are flow lines. So what flow lines provide for us is a graphical representation of how wind is going to move across and through our space. So we're waiting for the computer to catch up a little bit here. I'm going to move our slice to the correct location. So I'm looking at the flow line settings. I actually want them to come from the opposite side. Apply. There we go. Okay. And now we can see in a visual kind of way exactly how air is moving over and around our project. Now I could obviously do a little more detail in terms of this sectional model and look specifically at how air is flowing through. The one additional thing that I might need to do is work with my flow data in such a way that it is being a little bit more precise. And I can do that by going to my analysis grid settings and dropping my voxel size to a smaller or lower setting. And that basically uses more data, more spatial data, to calculate more precisely where wind is moving.